ผมทำอะไรไม่เคยพลาดพี่ถ้าผมทำแล้วมันต้องสำเร็จคุณบิ๊กกับคุณเกอร์ต้องรักกันเว้ย
Q is the most popular boy in school. He is handsome, plays the guitar, and sings, so every girl has a crush on him. One day, a boy named Big approaches him and asks if he can join his group. Q has no intention of letting him join, but to have some fun, he challenges Big to jump into the school pond and bring him a turtle. Q's best friend, Joe, is sure that Big is not brave enough to take on the challenge. However, Big actually jumps into the pond and retrieves the turtle, along with a fish hanging from his crotch. Big happily presents the turtle, but Q rejects his request anyway, and upon seeing the fish, Q nicknames him Sucker. Then, on the way home, Q's neighbor, a girl named Kerr, proposes to him, but Q rejects her and teases her by calling her fat. Kerr is heartbroken and tells him that when she grows up, even if he takes off his clothes and says he loves her, she will never accept him. Q doesn't care, and he begins spraying water on her, so Kerr runs to her home. Q is sure he has a bright future ahead, but a few years later, his life has taken a complete U-turn. He and his best friend have now become salesmen for a water pump company called Sucker Enterprise. They now go to several places to promote their company's new water pump machine called Super Sucker, and every day, they are struggling to meet their sales quota. Then one day at the office, one of their coworkers, Mew, informs them that the new CEO has arrived. He is the son of the company's boss and the inventor of the Super Sucker water pump. The new CEO immediately recognizes Q, and reveals that he is Big from their school days. He also reveals that he had to leave school because everyone started calling him Big Sucker after the pond incident. However, he actually thanks Q, because that very nickname gave him the idea to invent their new product, the Super Sucker. After their brief chat, Big leaves, and Q and Joe are speechless, because they know that they are going to have a difficult time at the office from now on. To make matters worse, Q's love life has also taken a complete U-turn. Kerr has grown up to become incredibly beautiful, and Q has now fallen deeply in love with the very girl he once rejected. Then one day, Q finds out Kerr is seeing someone. To drive the guy out of her life, Q and Joe track him to a supermarket. Stalking him through the aisles, they stage a loud conversation, fabricating a rumor that Kerr is secretly pregnant, and hunting for a wealthy man to trap. Hearing this, the guy gets terrified, and decides to break up with Kerr on the spot. Later that night, Q overhears the guy breaking up with Kerr over the phone. Then again one day, Q sees a different guy dropping Kerr off at home. Q walks up to the guy and invites him into his room. Inside, the guy spots a memorial portrait of Kerr. Q falsely explains that Kerr was his younger sister who died 3 months ago, warning him that her spirit sometimes brings unsuspecting people to the house. Q advises the guy to change his phone number to break the curse, but the guy refuses to believe. Meanwhile, Kerr, who has just taken a quick shower, notices her date's car is still parked outside. She goes out to investigate, and spots his shoes outside Q's house. Inside, the guy tries to leave, and as he opens the door, Q stops him, and offers the protective necklace. He refuses it, and tries to open the door again, but the partially opened door accidentally hits Kerr and knocks her out. At that exact moment, Q stops him again, insisting he take the necklace. But the guy still refuses, and as he opens the door fully, he sees dazed Kerr on the ground with wet and messy hair. The guy mistakes Kerr for a ghost, so he quickly grabs the protective necklace and runs for his life. Puzzled by his reaction, Kerr gets up, looks inside, and discovers her picture being used as a memorial portrait. Q makes a lame excuse for pranking the guy, so Kerr gets angry and storms off. In this way, Q drives off every guy who tries to get close to Kerr. One night, while going through Kerr's Facebook profile, Q gets a pop-up to join a dating group. He declines it, but the request keeps popping up, so in frustration, he accepts it. He is directed to a sign-up page, and he fills out the form. The next day at the office, Big is waiting for Q because he is late for work. Big then orders Q to bring the turtle statue downstairs. The statue is very heavy, and while Q is carrying it down, Big begins talking about the pond incident, and warns him not to be late for work again. Thereafter, Q meets Joe in the office, and Joe reveals that he was the one who had brought the turtle statue upstairs in the first place. After work, on his way home, a mysterious man approaches Q and asks him about the dating site that he signed up for the previous night. The man then hands him a member's notebook, but Q refuses to take it. The man says it doesn't matter if he takes the notebook or not, and informs Q that his life is about to change. The man leaves, and magically, the same notebook appears in Q's hand, so he throws it to the ground. After getting off the train, Q hears the voice of the same man telling him that he has become a Cupid, unaware that the notebook has already made its way back into his bag. The next day at the office, Joe makes a comment about the bad haircut of a coworker named Jud. Shortly after, a new employee named Aim asks them for directions to the host store. Joe pulls her leg and tries to flirt with her by asking if she has a boyfriend. In response, Aim jokingly replies that Jud is her boyfriend and that she likes his hairstyle, and then she leaves. Overhearing their conversation, Mew begins teasing Joe, because they always mock each other and play silly pranks. After hearing Aim's comment about his hairstyle, Jud is left baffled. Seeing this, Q decides to pull his leg and advises him to go after Aim to win her heart. Now on his way home, Q sees some schoolboys watching Ker's video on YouTube. The boys comment on Ker being sexy, and hearing this, Q gets angry and starts arguing with them. Since Q is all alone, he gets thrown off the train by the schoolboys. Outside, the same man from yesterday greets him. The man then explains to Q that he has become a Cupid, and from now on, his mission is to bring people together as couples, without letting them know his true identity. Q refuses to believe him, and tries to hand back the notebook, but the man says he cannot quit once the sign-up is complete. He also reveals that the notebook is a special book. Only Cupids can see its content, while normal people lack the ability to see it. Q thinks the man is lying, so he grabs the notebook and asks one waitress to read the book, but she says that the notebook is completely blank. Q then runs down the street and asks passers-by to read the book, but everyone tells him that there is nothing written inside. Finally, one person is actually able to read it. Q is thrilled to find someone who can see the text, but it turns out that the person is also a Cupid. Q finally accepts the fact that he has become a Cupid, but the real disaster hits when the person reveals a terrible rule that a Cupid can never fall in love, and can never say I love you to anyone. Q thinks that the person is just joking, and he heads home. Suddenly, Ker comes running toward him, because she is being chased by an obsessed admirer. To get rid of her stalker, Ker tells the man that Q is her boyfriend. Q plays along, but the stalker doesn't believe them, and demands proof that they are a couple. Seizing the moment, Q decides to finally express his feelings toward her. However, when he tries to say that he likes her, the Cupid curse makes him say perverted things, like how her breasts are wonderful, and how he wants to rest his head on them. Hearing this, Ker gets angry and slaps him. She then says that he is still an evil person like before, and storms off to her house. Q follows her and tries to express his true feelings, but he keeps blurting out perverted things, claiming that he is a sex addict, who likes to smell women's underwear. The stalker is amazed by Q's openly perverted talk, and asks Q to be his master. Q gets really angry and chases the stalker away. Q is now completely hopeless, but his senior tells him that there is a way out. If a newbie Cupid can successfully create 3 couples within their first 4 attempts, they can choose to become a normal person again or remain a Cupid. He also explains that each Cupid gets a support tool that helps them complete the mission successfully. One of the seniors reveals that his special tool is a newspaper, and in Q's case, it is the notebook. The senior then explains that the couple's information will appear in the book, and it also has the ability to reveal their inner thoughts. Lastly, the photos of the couple will be marked with an X if the Cupid is unable to match them. One of the seniors is named Yam, and starting the next day, Yam begins to guide Q on how things work. He shows Q some active Cupids doing their jobs, and explains that they will do whatever it takes to match couples, even playing the role of a thief. Shortly after, Q receives his first mission, and all the details about the couple appear in his notebook. Q spots the guy and follows him to begin the mission. The man and woman always take the same train to work, and the man really wants to be close to her. This time, Q must figure out a way to help him start a conversation with her. Q plans to trip the man so that he stumbles into the woman, giving them a chance to talk and begin their romantic journey. However, when Q actually trips him, the man accidentally pulls down the woman's dress, exposing her in public. Another man quickly steps in, offers his coat to the woman, and punches the man. The crowd immediately labels the man a pervert and begins beating him. Seeing his plan go horribly wrong, Q escapes the scene, while the other man begins comforting the woman. Shortly after, Yam meets with Q, and he is shocked to see that the mission failed. Yam then warns Q that if he fails the next one, he will be stuck as a Cupid forever. Yam then decides to show Q how it's done, so he decides to bring him along on his own mission. A woman is visiting a casket store to check prices for a friend, and Yam's mission is to match this woman with the store owner. Yam and Q secretly watch them, and Yam comes up with a plan that he explains to Q. After inquiring about the price, the woman leaves, and since Yam is a flower delivery guy, the store owner already knows him, so Yam begins teasing him for checking out the woman. Shortly after, Q comes in and asks the owner why the woman was here. The owner tells him the truth, and Q begins to act. He claims that the woman is his older sister, and has only a few months left to live because of cancer. That's why she must be visiting the store to check out the casket for herself. Q also adds that her boyfriend broke up with her after the diagnosis. So as a good brother, Q expresses his wish for someone to make her happy in her remaining time. While Q spins this fabricated story, Yam continuously hints to the owner that he should get in touch with her. Finally, Yam urges him to be that guy, and hands over the woman's phone number. The store owner agrees to contact her, and he is determined to bring joy into her life. Yam and Q celebrate their successful mission, but the triumph is short-lived. When Yam shows his newspaper to Q, it reveals that the couple's photos are marked with an X. Yam and Q quickly rush back to the store, and find out that the owner has decided to become a monk. It turns out the owner wants to bring joy to the woman's life by blessing her as a holy man. He also reveals that he had always wanted to dedicate his life to being a monk. Yam is in disbelief that his mission was unsuccessful, and now Q receives his second mission. To his surprise, it is to match his best friend, Joe, with his co-worker, Mew. With the help of his notebook, Q finds out that both Joe and Mew like each other, but they refuse to admit it. He also discovers that Joe has created a secret Facebook profile, which he uses to talk with Mew and be close to her. Meanwhile, Ker's career is heading in a good direction. One of her teachers thinks she is perfect for modeling, and lets her practice more to become a professional. Now at the office, Q begins his mission to match Joe with Mew. He asks Joe how he feels about her, and Joe claims he has no feelings for her, but Q counters that he knows about the secret Facebook profile. At that exact moment, Mew arrives, and Q reveals to her that Joe is her secret Facebook friend. Joe admits the truth to Mew, which makes her incredibly happy. Q thinks he successfully matched Joe with Mew, but Joe instantly destroys the mood by saying that he only did it to play a prank on her. Hearing this, Mew gets deeply hurt and walks out, but she quickly comes running back and kicks Joe for playing with her feelings. Witnessing this sudden chaos, Q is left completely shocked. The next day, after learning of Q's latest failed attempt, the senior Cupid decides to assign him a consultant to guide him on his mission. He then praises the consultant for being the best of the best because he has never failed a single matchmaking mission. Shortly after, the consultant arrives, and his name is Odd. Yam gets incredibly excited, and starts bowing upon meeting the legendary Cupid. However, Q seems a little disappointed, because Odd seems like a normal motor taxi driver. Q then treats Odd to lunch, and Odd is ready to help him out. Odd then points out that the matching mission of Mew and Joe has not failed yet, because their photos are not marked with X. Then suddenly, Odd stops Q, and begins his matchmaking mission right on the spot. He grabs the backside of a woman standing in front of them, making her think a male passerby touched her, so she immediately slaps the innocent man. However, Odd reveals to the woman that Q was the actual culprit. Hearing this, Q begins to run, and Odd pretends to chase him. Now feeling guilty for slapping the wrong man, the woman apologizes to him, and offers to help carry his bag to his house. In this way, Odd instantly carries out the mission, and his special tool, which is a tablet, shows that the matchmaking was successful. After seeing this, Q finally believes that Odd is indeed the legendary Cupid. Shortly after, Q receives his next mission, and Yam tags along to work with them as well. After reading the couple's details, Q becomes completely hopeless, because he has to matchmake a schoolboy who is in love with a girl from a senior class, and that girl has a crush on another guy, who is a singer in the school band. Fortunately, there is another Cupid in the school, and she is happy to help them. It turns out, she has a matching mission of her own. She has to pair one of her friends with that same singer guy. Afterwards, they see the schoolboy getting bullied by senior students, so they step in to help him, and teach those bullies a lesson by drawing on their faces. Now, the school Cupid girl begins her mission. She hands a handkerchief and a necklace to the singer guy, and tells him that her friend gave these gifts to him. The guy instantly falls for her friend after seeing her, so he wears that handkerchief and necklace while performing with his band. While singing, he keeps looking at the girl, so the Cupid girl begins teasing her friend by saying that the guy might have fallen for her, which makes the girl really shy. Now, the senior girl also arrives to watch his performance, but she notices that his focus is entirely on someone else. After the performance, the Cupid girl hands a flower to her friend, and pushes her toward the guy. The guy accepts the flower, and the Cupid girl successfully completes her matchmaking mission. Seeing all this, the senior girl gets sad, and she walks out from there. She then comes across the schoolboy, who is singing on his own while Q plays the guitar. She enjoys the boy's voice, so she sits down to watch him, while the other Cupids begin throwing paper confetti from above. After the performance, the senior girl compliments his singing, and since they live in the same neighborhood, they decide to walk home together from now on. In this way, Q and his team successfully manage to complete the mission. Meanwhile, a modeling agency sees Ker's YouTube video, and decides to sign her. Afterward, Q receives his next mission to matchmake an undercover police officer. Odd and Q track down the officer, and they are amazed to see him fighting a gang of thugs all by himself. Odd gets really impressed, and walks forward to praise the officer, right in the middle of the fight. The officer is confused, and seizing the moment, one of the bad guys grabs the gun and points it directly at Odd's head. The officer quickly kicks Odd's hand, causing Odd to accidentally slap the bad guy. The officer then swiftly reclaims the gun, and finishes off the remaining injured thugs. After defeating them, the officer begins to interrogate Q and Odd. In a panic, Q begins to tell about the officer's personal details and all of his secret government missions. Suspicious, the officer raises his gun, and points it at them, demanding to know who they really are. However, Q and Odd cannot explain that they are Cupids. Whenever Odd attempts to confess the truth, the Cupid curse forces him to say that he is the officer's father, which only makes the officer more angry. Suddenly, Q gets a phone call from Joe, who informs him that Kerr has been in an accident and is currently in the hospital. Hearing this, Q sneakily runs off, leaving Odd all alone with the angry officer. While racing toward the hospital, Q sees Kerr's new ad posters plastered on the walls, making him realize that Kerr is on her way to success, and he may not be the perfect match for her. Upon arriving at the hospital, he is relieved to see that Kerr only has minor injuries. Then, Big suddenly enters the room, because he was the one who caused the accident. Wanting to humiliate Q in front of Kerr, Big orders him to prepare a meal for her. Q quietly prepares the meal, and once he is finished, he heads back to rescue Odd. To his surprise, Odd has already managed to talk through the officer's complicated love life, which has left the officer in tears. It is then revealed that the officer likes a girl, but he is afraid to confess, because he thinks it will ruin their friendship. Odd and Q encourage the officer to confess his feelings to her, and he agrees to do it. They then head over to the shop where she works, and Q and Odd go inside first to talk to her. However, to their absolute surprise, the person the officer likes is actually a man. Odd and Q immediately run out from the shop, and they were unaware of it because the photo of another person was damaged due to a coffee spill. Since it is man-on-man action, both Odd and Q have no idea what to do next. But somehow, Q manages to talk his way through it, and helps the officer realize that he should express his feelings. The officer immediately walks inside the shop and confesses his love. He then reveals that he has to go on a dangerous mission and may not come back alive. Hearing this, the other man is speechless, so the officer turns to leave. But as the officer is about to step out, the man stops him, and tells him to come back safely. In this way, Q successfully completes his matchmaking mission. Now, Q only needs to bring Mew and Joe together to finally live a normal life. But out of nowhere, Mew decides to quit her job, which leaves both Joe and Q in complete shock. That night, Q, Odd, and Yam get together for drinks and begin talking about how difficult it is to be a Cupid. Yam then reveals that the woman from the casket store was his ex-girlfriend. When he was a newbie Cupid, he successfully created 2 couples, but when it came to the third couple, he got a mission to matchmake his ex-girlfriend with another guy. He could not bring himself to do it, and eventually failed that mission, as well as the ones that followed. From that day on, Yam got stuck being a Cupid forever. After several more drinks, Yam gets completely wasted, and begins to act wildly, hiding the deep pain of not being able to confess his feelings to his ex-girlfriend. Odd tries to calm the intoxicated Yam down, but he ends up joining in on the drunken fun. At that exact moment, Odd gets a new mission on his tablet. Q checks it, and sees that it is a mission to matchmake Big with Kerr. Terrified of ending up like Yam, Q decides to steal Odd's tablet to intentionally fail the mission. The next day at the office, Q notices that Joe is miserable about Mew quitting her job. He advises Joe to confess his feelings to her, but Joe still denies being in love with her. Q then drags Joe to Mew's new workplace, and Joe finally builds up the courage to confess to Mew. Q then calls Mew and asks her to come outside the building. Soon, Joe and Mew are standing face to face. But just as Joe begins to confess his feelings, Mew's boyfriend suddenly shows up and takes her to a nearby restaurant for lunch. Joe can only stand there and watch them walk away. Witnessing all this drama, Q is left in total shock, but fortunately, his notebook has not yet marked Mew and Joe with an X. Meanwhile, Yam still believes that Odd can help Q complete this mission. However, Odd is facing a massive problem with management after losing his tablet. He is on the verge of losing his job as a Cupid, so he is really depressed. Odd's parents divorced when he was a child, and soon after, he became a Cupid. His very first mission was to bring his father and mother back together. However, the mission failed when Odd's father passed away. That was his only failure, and he had vowed never to fail a mission again. Hearing Odd's tragic backstory, Q begins to feel guilty for stealing his tablet, so he tries to secretly slip it back into Odd's bag but fails. That night, despite a heavy downpour, Odd shows up in front of Q's house to confront him. Odd received a replacement tablet from management, and figured out Q was the one who stole the tablet. Feeling completely betrayed, Odd vows to bring Kerr and Big together. Q knows that he did the wrong thing, so he just stands without saying a word. Now, the next day at the office, Q is shocked to see that Odd has made his way into the company as Big's personal advisor. Odd then introduces Kerr as the brand representative for the company's product. To make matters worse, Big informs Q that he will have to dress up as a suckerfish to appear on television alongside Kerr. Q realizes that this is Odd's ultimate plan to bring Big and Kerr together. Shortly after, Q receives an urgent call from the hospital informing him that Joe has tried to commit suicide. Q immediately rushes to the hospital to check on him, and soon after, Mew also arrives, but she brings her boyfriend along. Mew reveals that her current boyfriend is also her boss. She then secretly leaves a card on the table, along with some other gifts, and after a brief talk with Joe, they leave. Joe is devastated seeing Mew with another guy, so he again tries to commit suicide, but Q stops him just in time. Now at the office, Q dresses up as a suckerfish and begins practicing with Kerr for the product advertisement. While they are busy rehearsing, Odd starts encouraging Big to approach Kerr. Big then pauses the practice session so that Kerr can get some rest, but he orders Q to stay behind and start posing for pictures. Watching Kerr and Big together, Q gets really uncomfortable. Afterward, Odd, Kerr, and Big leave the room to have a snack, where Odd continues his relentless efforts to push Kerr and Big together. Shortly after, Q arrives in his bulky suckerfish costume and intentionally bumps into Big, causing drinks to spill all over him. While Odd takes Big to the washroom to clean up the mess, Q tells Kerr to stop spending time with Big. Kerr fires back, stating that he has no right to interfere in her personal life. However, she gives him one final chance to speak up if there is anything else he truly wants to say to her. Q tries to express his feelings, but instead, the Cupid's curse forces him to talk about her breasts, how he likes to smell her underwear, and how he has an STD. Seeing how hard Q is trying to express his feelings, Odd begins to feel bad for him. Meanwhile, Ker gets furious and storms out without saying a word. Big also loses his temper and threatens to fire him, so Q decides to quit the job on the spot. Afterward, Q goes to the hospital to talk with Joe and encourages him to confess to Mew one more time. However, seeing Mew happy with her wealthy boyfriend, Joe decides to let her go and step aside. Just then, Q receives a call from Odd, who asks to meet him outside the hospital building. When they meet, Odd reveals that he will not match Big with Ker, because his tablet confirms that Ker still has feelings for Q. Meanwhile, Joe finds the card that Mew had left for him, which turns out to be an invitation to her wedding. Seeing it, Joe immediately leaves the hospital building, and surprisingly, the ambulance driver decides to help take him to Mew's wedding venue. On the other hand, Q meets with Ker, and since he can never express his feelings to her, he decides to move away from her life. So he says his final goodbye, and walks away. Ker gets a feeling that something is wrong, so she follows Q out to the street, and asks him if he really likes her. Q tries to tell her how he feels, and surprisingly, he is finally able to say I love you to her. Q is surprised, and he keeps shouting that he loves her in the middle of the busy road. Ker is also filled with joy, and stops him from shouting. Finally, they hug each other, and Q gets a call from Jut. It turns out, Jut actually followed Q's advice to go after Aim, and they are now officially a couple. Because Q has successfully brought 3 couples together, the Cupid curse is finally broken, allowing him to freely express his feelings to Ker. Now, Ker reminds Q of what she had told him in the past, and demands he take off his clothes. Q hesitantly takes off his shirt, but Ker is still not satisfied. So, Q starts taking off his pants, but Ker runs toward him to stop him, and pulls him into a hug. Finally, Q and Ker are together, and witnessing this, Big and Odd admit their defeat to true love. Meanwhile, Joe attends Mew's wedding, and he is clearly heartbroken. While writing a congratulatory message in the couple's guest book, he begins pouring out his feelings for her. He then continues writing a long list of everything Mew likes and dislikes. Intrigued, the wedding guests gather around to watch what he will write next. Mew notices the commotion, and after reading Joe's heartfelt words, she decides to call off the wedding to be with Joe. Sometime later, Q checks his notebook and notices 2 pages stuck together. He then sees that his actual first mission was to matchmake Jut and Aim. So, Q really did manage to create 3 couples in his first 4 attempts. With both Q and Joe securing their happy endings, the movie ends. Later, in a post-credit scene, Yam also gets back together with his ex-girlfriend, even though he is still unable to confess his true feelings to her. So this was the movie My Name is Love. It is a Thai romantic comedy movie that was released in 2012. Like and comment if you enjoyed the video and remember to subscribe to the channel for more movie breaks.